Good morning, Mike. How you doing?
Hello, Steve.
It
How are
sounds
you
like you have
today?
an apology today. Are you
No
good? Are you
apologies.
good?
Just
No
just
apologies?
wanted
Okay,
to take a calm approach,
that's good.
and
That's good.
I think that there's a need for some deep breaths and contemplation before speaking. So I'm
Okay,
going to think before speaking today.
that's
Although
that's
yesterday
good. I
was
mean,
great,
it's
wasn't
that's
it?
a nice
Come on,
change.
yesterday
That's
was
like
that's all
this.
I could do.
Yesterday
Yesterday was
was good.
great. I love
Yesterday was
yesterday.
good. It was good. I watched it back and it made me giggle. It really did. That opening where you apologize and then all of a sudden it became my fault and me owning the fact and making it own that it was my fault. I liked it. It,
Yes.
it did made me giggle. But then there was also some real interesting things we spoke about, and I actually took a snippet of yesterday's um, show and then put it on LinkedIn. And it was the aspect where we talked about collisions. How do we recreate those collisions that take place in the office?
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
do we recreate those in a virtual world? Given that we're likely to be in this situation for a little while, and organizations and teams want to be innovative, they want to be productive, but they want to be connected to each other, right? So I
Absolutely.
posted it. I say late last night. It was 8 p.m., which is late for me.
It's late your
Um,
time.
it is late my time, and yeah, I got some responses, and a lot of people are sort of contributing to the conversation. So no,
Great.
it's good. And there's not that many people who have answers, but at least it started a conversation, and that's how innovation happens. That's how new products get developed, and it's something that we should be thinking about. There was one product suggested. I haven't looked at it, so I don't want to say the name just yet. So I just want to give it my review before I start promoting something that I haven't seen as yet. But it's a real conversation. A lot of people are chiming in, so it's good. It's good to start that. So yeah, yesterday's show was good, man, and I encourage anyone listening, if you have ideas or suggestions about ways to communicate and ways for teams to be connected randomly within organizations, then let's hear it. Put it in the comments below.
Yeah, you were being productive yesterday and thinking about strategies around the here and now. And I
uh,
continue to struggle because I'm always looking ahead. I'm always wondering impatiently what the next thing is. How do we get back to the workplace? How do we mentally prepare, psychologically prepare? And
yeah.
that's where I am drawn to all my attention. It seems like, and I'm getting a lot more information. Today's Workplace Innovator interactive live stream is going to be a good one because we're going to talk about this. Kay Sargent of HOK, and they've written a number of articles around what the post COVID-19 or the workplace return reentry seems to be the terminology that everybody's using, reentering the workplace. And there's a lot of strategy related to that. There's a lot of psychology related to it. I'm anxious to ask Kay about the human side because I don't see that written up as much in these articles, whether it's IFMA or Cornet or other organizations putting out information. I haven't found a comprehensive view of that psychological emotional safety that's going to be required for each of us. And and I expressed this yesterday pretty well. I think better than I did Monday. Monday was a disaster as far as my squirrel. I was looking. I kept seeing a squirrel. I kept looking elsewhere for other information. But when I stay focused, and this is where I feel I can do my best to serve this community and bring in the experts who know about the protocols and the procedures and those plans. And there's some great stuff being shared. Have you seen any of the materials out there being shared? Other organizations that are publicly putting out their return to work policies or strategies? Have you seen any of those documents floating around?
So I haven't seen any company publish anything about their internal working documents. I haven't seen anything like that, which is understandable because you know they typically don't. I've seen something Cushman & Wakefield have put together. They've put together a very elaborate playbook. I've yet to go through it. I think it's 30 something pages, but it goes through all concepts of building facilities, real estate, workplace consulting. In a sense, consulting, I'm meaning that how do you navigate through a workplace, right? So it's their perspective and their different services that they're offering, but they go through it in a great detail. A lot of information is in there.
Yeah.
And but I haven't seen too much else, and that's not to say that other things aren't there. I know there's a lot of webinars on this topic that's circulating at the moment, and trying to keep up with all the webinars that has gone on
Yeah, I can't
is
do it.
such a challenge, man. It's
I
such a
tried to watch one
challenge.
yesterday and I just started fast
Uh,
forwarding through believe me, I'm the one who puts these things on and you are too. Many times we're
yeah.
the ones presenting the content and we think we're so thoughtful and brilliant. But I tell you, it's such an information overload. Remember the police? Too much information running through my brain. Too much information driving me insane. That's where I was Monday and
You know,
Tuesday. I think
that's just you beat me to the punch, man. That's
yeah.
exactly what I was about to tell you, man. That's exactly what I was about to tell you. But
What
on
album
that,
was
did
that
you?
from? Do you remember that
I have
album?
no idea. I have no
I
idea.
want to say that was Ghost in the Machine. I want to
Yeah.
say before Synchronicity. But anyway, they're
Anyway,
your
anyway,
boys. They're your boys from the UK.
yeah,
They're
no, they are. They
Sting
are.
and the boys are from.
They are. They certainly are. And I did see them in Madison Square Gardens a few years ago. It's the only time I've seen them live. But yeah, fun. They're fun. Fun group. Fun group.
Let's just talk about music
S-
now, Steve, because this whole
Why, man?
workplace reentry and strategy, it just overwhelms me at times. But no,
It's
the thing I saw, and just to kind of close that loop, there was somebody shared on Workplace Evolutionaries uh, chat room a game plan. I'm not sure where it was from. And then I saw some internal stuff. So I don't want to say I saw some internal documentation going around where they were pulling from other companies and they had actually shared their playbooks as well. And they're brand names that I know. I'm not sure if they were given to us internally or they were out there and my leadership found them. But I'm looking forward to seeing that communication take place because I'm all about people need communication. People need to hear the vision. They need to hear the reasons for doing what we're doing. So this this struggle we're having in our society broadly, the polarization that's going to take place, and it's just inevitable because people get a little bit of information here, a little bit of information there, a headline from one news network here, a headline from another there, and then they take their internal fears and anxieties and biases and they just wrap it all up in this little bit of information and then fill in the blanks with all the worst case scenario negative motivations, negative thinking, and then we get ourselves into trouble. We start arguing and nothing gets done. So I know this is going to be a challenge for corporate leaders, for workplace leaders, and I want to see that effort being made to really communicate. Here's what we have in mind. Here's why we're doing what we're doing. We're reopening based on these guidelines, these data, and I hope we'll see that.
No, I think within organizations, you're going to see that, right? I think employees will feel that their organizations have control, have their arms around it. There is a plan, there is a process. Every organization, I'm sure, is looking at how do we do that, right? How do we make our employees feel safe? How do they walk and operate within a workplace environment? Because we said each day, right, there is a need for some employees who really want to go back to the office. So how do you allow them and enable them to do that safely? So there is, and I think there is things like that. But what actually gets me, so we think about, yes, there is the tactical situation
Yep.
we're going through right now, but then what is the long-term strategy? That's the bit that gets my juices going, right? That's the bit that I sort of wake up and I sit and I ponder and I think through, as I think about what I need to do to execute certain leases around the world when I'm not going to get on an airplane. And so then how do I actually see the space? How do I feel a new space? Right? What's going to motivate me to uproot and sort of provide information to senior leadership that actually the building we're in may not be ideal, but this other building is? How do I get to a position to enable me to do things like that? And I think that's where information, digital twins of actual buildings, of floor plans, immersive media. So is there a way that I can actually physically see, walk through, and experience a building to allow me to do some of those things? So that's sort of things that are going through my head. And as I think about, okay, what does the future look like? Who will be the first landlord to actually provide this solution that'll enable me to see a building the other side of the world? I can put this on, I can experience it, I can see their infrastructure, I can know what an employee is going to feel whenever they walk through. Because most of the time when we're evaluating Offices, yes, we do our analysis on, commute studies. We look at our analysis on security protocols around the building, within the building. But then we walk into that space. What does it feel like? How high are the ceilings? What's the view out the window? How much light exposure do we get? How do we take all those things into consideration? And, it really is, this is where an opportunity, I think, for innovation really to take place, to allow uh, people who do procure real estate for their organizations to really take advantage of some of those ideas. That goes through my head. And another question that goes through my head is the universal workplace, right? So it's, how do we provide a workplace for everybody? Those people who need touch, well, if they can't touch anymore, how do we allow them to navigate through a workplace? And how do we ensure that takes place? This is another deep thought that goes through my head each day,
Yeah, and
Mike.
and you got me thinking because I've been to so many conferences as you have over these past few years where a lot of the really cool innovations and technologies and tools are on display, and we see these startup companies with an app or a some type of a integrated tool that can be used to do the things you just described. But I always had a concern back then that there were a lot of solutions looking for a problem to solve. So I always worried that there was this huge, growth in CRE tech or prop tech, whatever you want to call it. And I would go to these conferences. I'm like, that's really cool. That's a cool little gizmo, or that's a cool little, 3D view of the space. But at this point, who's going to really invest in that? But I think you're telling me it sounds like you as a practitioner are going to see some of those tools really come into a real valuable place because a month ago, 2 months ago, before the pandemic, you maybe didn't need those tools, but now in this new work from home, physical distance, touch free, all these types of factors are now top priority where they weren't
Hmm.
just a couple months ago. So that's
Yeah.
interesting to see which ones will play out. Do you have any you want to name brands, but you mentioned the digital twins and the some of those 3D views uh, to really help you make decisions as if you're physically there. I think this may push a lot of those types of uh, companies forward pretty quickly.
No, I think so. And I think it's going to be the landlord. The landlord probably will be the one who takes the responsibility for it. I think there'll be also brokerage firms who encourage and bring and introduce companies to landlords to allow them to do that type of work, because that's what the broker's clients need to see and want to see. So,
Yeah,
and I
interesting.
think it's just an opportunity. If you think of a new building coming out of the ground right now, how do you entice a organization to leave where they're currently at and go to this new building if the people who are decision makers aren't able to actually physically to go and see the building, or won't are not prepared to get on an airplane today to actually see your building. So I think it's just it's a real opportunity for innovation. And I'm sure there are lots of organizations looking at this. I know they do. Some organizations do provide video Skype calls, views, walkthroughs. But if you think about the housing market and what Zillow and that has done through 360 views of a home, while they
Yeah,
give you a sense of what's there, you don't really feel what's there. But then with the development of this immersive technology, where actually you do feel it's is a 360 visual, can you then give that person or a company a real idea of what's there? So yeah. So although I am in the tactical weeds of stuff, there is the other side that I am looking ahead.
yeah.
How do we solve these types of problems?
Well, I know you can't share
Mhm.
too much about the tactical weeds, but I am curious
Yeah.
to know broadly some of the thoughts going on. Are you doing surveys? Are you trying to get a handle on through surveys or through some other communication internally as far as who's going to need space, maybe that did, who's not going to need space because it's going to continue to work from home, and then begin there and then see the ramifications of that. Are you do you think, and also there's the ramifications around physical distancing and in this new normal, the new return to the office, and have you been talking through those strategies of or changes that maybe have to be made at different offices? Different, we talked about yesterday, culture is such a big part of this.
Hmm.
Different
Hmm.
cultures, different geographic regions, different hot spots. What's going on in New York may not be applicable to some other parts of the country or the world when it comes to the level of fear or the need for creating comfort through space and through other techniques. Um, a lot of questions all wrapped up in one, but are those the kind of conversations you're having on a regular basis these days?
No, absolutely. So we're absolutely thinking about, okay, how do we, if we wanted to create a safe environment, what does it look like? What does the floor plan look like? If we have using 100 seats, how many seats can we allow people to sit in so that that physical distancing is able to be maintained? Evaluating each conference room is, do we put a limit on it? How do we come up with those decisions, right? Is there a one direction that we put into a floor plan so everyone walks in one direction? How do we manage pantries, kitchen areas, right? Is there a number of people we allow in because of the size of it? How do we access bathrooms? Do we put boundaries on where people can go depending on which side of the floor you're sitting on? And as you can imagine, each floor plan, each building is completely different. There are bathrooms within our demise. There are bathrooms that we share with other tenants in some of our smaller locations. So, what are the protocols? Elevators, what are the protocols for that? That takes a lot of coordination with landlords and individual landlords. And within New York City, four different landlords. How do you manage that if each have different standards? Now,
Hmm.
whenever you collect all this information, then you have to disseminate it to the employees. How do you communicate this to employees? How do they feel that, they will be safe
Right.
in that environment? And how do you educate them on these are the protocols, these are the policies, and this is the procedures? If you wish to go into the office, then this is what's at play. um, Absolutely, none of it's been agreed. Obviously, these are
Yeah.
just things that we're talking about. But in essence, you have to put together a process and a plan in play to allow you to be successful in doing this. Also, who knows when we'll be allowed to go back into the offices? So it's like
True.
setting
Yeah.
all those different things up. So we yeah,
First
absolutely,
things
those are things that have
first.
been considered. Yeah, yeah.
I was debating whether to share this, but I don't think there's any harm in doing
I
so.
actually saw your face. I actually saw
Yeah.
your face considering, should I do this or shouldn't I do this?
Well, this is my printout of questions that we're going to bring up at the live stream today. And here you are. If you're halfway through OSW Daily Live and you're going to join me at noon Eastern for Workplace Innovator Interactive Live with Kay Sargent, then here's a sneak preview of what we're going to talk about. But I imagine this will be seen later or after the fact, so it doesn't really matter. But some of the questions, and these are things Kay helped put together, addressing those specific tactical issues, and you don't need to answer if you don't feel comfortable. But for example, is your company looking at reducing the densification of the space at any given time? And if so, how? Will you be continuing the work from home policy? Will you be maybe going to a 4-day work week while being open all 5 days so you can spread people out that way? Will you be going to shifts or staggered start times? No, we're just going to look at other means of physical distancing, or no, we already feel we have the right utilization rate to allow for physical distancing. Is that something you have a,
Oh, absolutely. Oh, great questions. And
yeah.
absolutely. And then how do you get to that? Is there going to be a decrease or an increase in densification, right? So yeah. So increase, I think, is the right way to go.
Yeah, I was
But
going to
you
say
know what I
what
mean,
I wrote.
right?
I
Yeah,
said
yeah, 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 yeah.
reducing densification because we've been densifying, but do we need
Right,
to kind of,
right.
whatever
Step
the
back.
opposite of densify
Right,
is,
right.
expand?
So yeah, I mean, absolutely. Because I mean, most offices today are open plan. They're 5.5 feet, 6 feet desks, sort of back to back, sort of the old trading floor type of setup.
Yeah.
Whenever you do the math and the measurements, then there only is X amount of people you can put into that. So you may only get a 25-30% occupancy rate at that sort of setup. But in essence, will that allow us to do things initially, allow people to get back to the office? And that's what we're looking at. That's sort of the viewpoint that you take it. But then you go, okay, so what is the longer term plan and how do you manage that if more people wanted to come back? And you do set up teams, right? You do A/B teams. You alternate days when people come in, or you alternate weeks that people come in. You do deep cleaning in betweens. There'll be people who want to work from home more long term. I mean, we've spoke about before, but Kay Lister, president of Workplace Analytics, she suggests that actually we're going to go from 4% work from home to 25% work from home.
Yeah.
So how does
I've heard
that
as high as
apply?
30. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
no, I mean, I think it's going to be one of these moving targets that it is going to increase. But then the other side of it is, okay, so is it a increase or decrease in densification? But then also will organizations continue to have large buildings in city centers? That's something else that who knows what we do in the
Yeah,
future,
that's the real long term you were alluding to at the
right?
beginning here, because that's some real strategic decisions.
Yeah.
I read an article yesterday about Alphabet, Google's parent
Mm-hmm.
company,
Mm-hmm.
you know, either abandoning or moving away from 8 million square feet of space in the Bay Area. Like the Bay Area, they had been in negotiations for 8 million more square feet of space, and they've actually just put that on hold. Or I didn't read the details of the article, but there was a headline with a subheadline where it sounded pretty clear that they were at this point just putting that on the brakes on that. So the expansion uh, is something that is going to be impacted there. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what it does to the markets, what it does to the long term strategy, and some of these other, unique ideas you brought up in the last couple of days about hubs and regional hubs and local hubs for people to work and have get-togethers. And then we talk a lot about it in the strategy side. Here's another question. I'll give you another sneak preview of what we're going to ask today. But what, if any, modifications do you envision being made in your current workplace to prepare for reentry? You're going to enact unassigned seating to provide people with choice, go back to assigned desks, blocking out desks or removing seating as alternate desks to provide spacing between work points, reorienting or shifting desks to provide additional space between work points, installing screening between work points, or none, our space is already well aligned and we have the suggested guidelines already taken place. But you mentioned a couple of those things, but are they all being
Yeah,
considered?
I would say all of the above, probably except the last one. Um, I don't think there's many organizations or many offices around the world that actually can remain as is. There may be some. There may be, if I think about, a legal office where it's all individual offices, they could probably go in and they're able to maintain certain things, set protocols around printing, use of bathrooms, and pantry areas, and I think they're probably fine. But I think there's so many open offices. But the big conundrum is you just don't know how many people are going to go back to the office and
Yeah.
when they're going to go back and what you need to manage for. So yeah, so all of those things that you mentioned, absolutely, they're all on the table. The one thing I would say is obviously from a cost perspective, it's moving furniture is so expensive in New York City and other big cities
Mm-hmm.
as well. But so that has to be a consideration too. And it's not that it's we wouldn't an organization wouldn't make a decision on, okay, we won't do this because of the cost factor, but in essence it would have to be I think a strategic thing you would do because of the cost factor. So for example, it's to move a desk, break it down and move it around. It's actually almost as cheap to buy brand new and have it all installed. It's the same cost pretty much. So if you were going to
Interesting.
go to a different desk setup, then you may want to make that decision rather than just relocating or reconfiguring or doing certain things. But going
Hmm.
back to your
Wow.
previous point on
Yeah.
where I was mentioning on the different areas, and that's, I mean, this is an idea that came up in one of the conversations I had with Andrew Segal. I'm going to be posting tomorrow. He came up with the idea, and he mentioned during the video 4 areas of real concern, 4 cities. So what does the real estate look like? San Francisco was one area that he gave it for exactly that reason, right? You've got a very dense downtown area where everyone is really close together. Everyone commutes into that. The other areas he mentioned were Boston, New York City, and then the inner loop in Chicago. They're the ones where, people live outside and they commute in. Well, will those be the specific locations that actually people will reevaluate? Because a lot of other cities in the US, people drive in, so they're not really as reliant, although there are some reliance on public transport. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that evolves. You're kind of nodding and shaking your head. Or
Yeah,
I
well,
don't
that's
know.
I'm thinking about DC. I live in the DC metro, and it's
Mm-hmm.
it's that kind of thing. It's like there's a percentage of the workforce that relies on
Right.
public transportation, but not
Yeah.
everybody. It's not. There's a lot of traffic around here. I think of LA too. I'm not sure what their situation. Everything's so spread out. DC,
Mhm.
Virginia, and Maryland. It's all considered. Even West Virginia, some consider the far DC suburbs because people commute in from those places, and there's a lot of traffic and a lot of
Yeah.
individual decision making going on. But it's funny that all these decisions, when it comes to strategy or it comes to real estate or how much space we need, and then what we need to do with that space, it's driven by the great unknown at this point. How many people will want to come back, and how many people will be willing to come back? And I'm reminded of the conversation. I did have a chance to watch your sports
Ken,
expert,
yeah,
Ken. Fantastic, because some of the things he talked about human beings being resilient. And I totally agree with this. Whatever it is, he gave the analogy or the metaphor. I never know which it is, but the idea that when you work out, your muscles are they're in pain, and then you do
hmm
it again, and it doesn't hurt as much, and then the more you do it, it just becomes the new normal. That's going to be the case probably here as you're trying to figure out. People will come in. They're really going to be hesitant to come in, worried, fearful. What's it going to be like? The new normal, the new protocols. Will I feel safe? And then I think there's going to be this very quick adaptation is the right word of this was fine. It was like me going to Home Depot, you going to the grocery store. The first time is hard, the second time less so, and then the third time you're not even worried about it anymore. It just becomes the new expectation and normal. And let's just move ahead. So you're going to see maybe a slow trickle back to the workplace, and then people will be like, been there, done that, you know, and more it'll grow. Do you sense that's
yeah.
going to be the pattern?
No, I suspect so, but it's as I reminded, I may have mentioned to you before, Andrew Mawson, who obviously is a good friend of both of ours.
Yeah.
I did a video with him October, and we talked about how for humans change is so hard, and we're so resistant to change. And if you had to take most organizations are what 95, 98%, maybe even 100% of their employees are now working remotely. For you to take that and do that, the thought of that 2 months ago was just inconceivable. But actually, what's going to happen the longer this goes on is we're going to be used to being at home, and it's going to be a change management process to get people from home to the office. There are people who
Mm,
resist it. There will be people that don't want to do it for whatever reason, and there'll be organizations that will embrace it, and there'll be organizations that won't embrace it. It's going to be
yeah.
a really interesting thing to see how that evolves, and then turn it back into Ken, how we mentally adjust to that thing, right? It is all about adaptation, right? But at this moment in time, people are adapting to their home environment.
Yep.
So how do you then readapt them or motivate them or incentivize them or encourage, call it whatever it is you want, if you want them to go back into the office? So it's going to be a fascinating thing to see. I actually have a chat with Andrew on Friday to talk about some of these things. So he'll be also being introduced
Oh,
as
excellent.
a weekly interview. So he's a great guy and has a lot of good ideas, and it'll be really interesting to sort of tap into what he knows and hear his perspective too. So
You keep going, man. You're on a roll with your weekly interviews, your check-ins with these experts. It's fantastic. I got to catch up on some of the videos you put out. Um,
it's a lot of content, but these are this is happening because these are the people that I talk to just to get information, right? So we share information. So if I wasn't doing the video, I would be chatting to him about and how it relates and what I can do with my job at NASDAQ, right? That's where a lot of this stuff comes from. And a lot of these folks, I go, why don't we just record this, man? Because I guarantee if I'm asking the question, there are other concerns than other people have. So, and that's why we've gone to the 10-minute sort of thought of an interview, because people can sort of get a real deep, narrow focus on one specific thing. So no, and it's great for me. Trust me, I learn a lot. I come away with deeper thoughts than I went into the conversation. So it is
what
great.
do you learn from these conversations, Steve? You're doing it with me every day for 30
I
minutes.
learn I learned that everything I do or everything you do is my fault.
That's the
That's my key
main lesson.
takeaway. That's my key
Absolutely.
takeaway. No, come on. This is a great way to start the day. It sort of gets the brain going. It gets us both showered and clean early in the morning. So that's always a good way to start the day. So no, it's
Yeah,
and it's obviously great chatting with you all the time. So that's what
absolutely.
I get from it.
Well, me too. And the irony of some of the things you described, what used to be a change management problem going one direction is going to be a change management problem
hmm
in the other direction. But I heard a great quote from one of my past podcast guests, Ari Gaskell, another UK based innovation writer. And he said that, yeah, humans do resist change in the near term. If you're talking about months or weeks or even maybe some years, but we're really good at change in the long term. In
hmm
fact, if you look at the broader history, we've changed dramatically and have done a really good job with it, better than any other species. So it was kind of one of those paradoxes, right? Both
Yeah.
can be true. And I think that near term resistance is something that we always will face, but once we get into a new, situation, get a new technology in our hand, we become very adapted to it, and and it just becomes second nature. So I think
Yeah.
that's something we have to keep in mind in this COVID-19 world. Whatever things look like today will look different a month from now, look different a year from now, and we'll be okay. I think that's the big takeaway here. We just have to get
Yeah.
through some of these difficult challenges in the near term.
For sure. For sure. All right, Mike. Let's wrap it up there. The time is. I was waiting for my ding, but it didn't. It
It's
didn't. It
okay.
didn't come up. So
Off to the
there we
races.
go.
Have a good
Off to the
Wednesday.
races. You too, mate. You too. Good luck today.
Talk to you soon. Thank you.